Imagine you are suffering from anxiety and you go to the doctor. And instead of being given a prescription for medication, you're given a prescription that reads like this. Recommended activity, walking in a local park or a natural space. Dose, 45 minutes. Frequency, 3 times a week. Recommended location, Catalonia National Park or Rose Bay Beach. Refill, unlimited. This might sound outlandish, but it is actually being done in many places around the world. And if something apparently as simple as spending time in nature can be prescribed, one can wonder what happens when we grow up without it. Like I did. This is the street where I grew up. It was actually a national road, the main road from Barcelona to France at the time that ran through my town. So it was a very urban area with lots of traffic and noise. It was dangerous to cross the street, and there wasn't any place nearby that was safe to play outdoors. On the weekend, I went to a local park, but during the week, I went mostly from home to school and back. I wasn't fit. I suffered from allergies. I was clumsy. I didn't even learn to ride a bike. In contrast, this is where my granddad grew up, in that same house, in a rural area in northern Catalonia, not far from the Pyrenees, in the 1920s and 30s. In his memoirs, he described a life deeply connected to the land and place. They grew their own food. They knew the names of all animals, plants, trees. They even had specific names for some trees that they were used as landmarks. They gathered firewood from the woods and used dry leaves as fire starters. There was no food waste. Any food that humans didn't eat was given to the pigs, the hens, the dogs. It was a true circular economy. There were no cars, no plastic. Everything was sustainable and in harmony with nature. This change from the way my granddad grew up to how I grew up happened in just 2 generations, and it has been taking place all around the world. What does this mean for us humans? It means we are becoming more sedentary, surrounded by polluted air and roaring traffic. This has all sorts of consequences for our physical and mental health. Some are well known, such as higher rates of asthma, lung disease, allergies. Others are less obvious, such as the impacts of constant loud noise. For instance, a study found that kids living near major airports showed lowered results in reading, comprehension, and memory, and it was directly proportional to the level of noise. Those living in neighborhoods that were 20 decibels louder were almost 1 year behind in academic performance. Of course, I wasn't aware of any of this when I was growing up. For me, living in an apartment in a busy street was normal. But I was disconnected from nature, or I should say from the rest of nature, because we are nature too. I spent all my childhood and early adult years living in towns and cities, in apartments. By my late 20s, I was living in Brussels, working at a large American multinational as a financial analyst and under a lot of stress. Sometimes I worked 11, 12 hours nonstop, eating a sandwich in front of my computer, plus 1.5 hours of commuting. It was all go, go, go. I should have been proud and happy that I had a successful career. But that success felt like a heavy weight on my chest every morning when I woke up. My partner, an Irishman from Killarney, a gentleman there, was working in a similar environment. In the weekends, we felt drained, and we used to stay at home or at most go to the cinema. But at some stage, something clicked. We got a couple of bikes. That was when I finally learned to ride. Imagine me wobbling in the streets of Brussels at nearly 30. And we started going to a large forest in the outskirts of the city every weekend, the Forêt de Soignes. It was a game changer. It was a beech forest with long trails that felt worlds away from the city. When we were there, we felt so free and alive. And we always came back home feeling really recharged. This brought us to the increasing realization that in spite of good salary and good job prospects, we didn't want to live like this. After a few years, we decided to quit our jobs moved to a small seaside town in Catalonia and started working as freelancers from home. This was one of the best decisions of my life for my mental health. We lived at 500 meters from the sea. We spent a lot of time on the beach and the sea promenade. But it was still a town and quite noisy in summer. So after we had had 2 wonderful children, we decided we wanted them to grow up in a rural environment. And we moved to the countryside in northern Catalonia. It was so peaceful. All we could hear in the morning was birdsong. We also, because we worked from home, we were also able to spend several months a year in Ireland, in Killarney. And we went to the stunning Killarney National Park all the time. So unlike me, our children grew up mostly in rural areas and really connected to nature. We went for lots of hikes with them in the Pyrenees and the mountains of County Kerry in Ireland. They cycled to and from school through a dirt track surrounded by fields. They played with dirt. They foraged for blackberries, wild asparagus, pine cones for the fire. They climbed trees, hundreds of trees. And as they became teenagers, they still enjoyed spending time outdoors. At that stage, I was very conscious that spending time in nature is not only good for us, it is essential. But I became particularly aware of the healing power of nature during the pandemic. It came as a shock. There was the fear and the anxiety about the new virus, the lockdowns, the restrictions on social life and traveling. At the time, we had settled in Ireland and we couldn't travel to Spain for a long time. And then, in the middle of the last lockdown, in spring 2021, I lost my brother, who died suddenly of cardiac arrest, aged 34. During that time, I found that what helped me most to cope with anxiety and then grief was to spend time in nature. Whenever I could, I would head off to the Killarney National Park. But this time, something was different. I didn't go to a hike or to exercise. I just went for the sake of spending time in nature. Sometimes I would just sit by the lake, doing nothing, just being. I found that nature had a way of soothing me without any expectations. I didn't have to pretend to be strong, to be fine. I could be vulnerable, and nature was just there for me. This led me to a search to understand, why do we feel better when we are out in nature? I found that there is a huge body of scientific literature that explains the benefits of nature connection for our mental and physical health. The Japanese started researching this in the 1980s with the goal to reduce stress in their urban populations. They measured the blood pressure and cortisol levels in the saliva of participants before and after a walk in the forest, and found that both decreased substantially after just a couple of hours. This led to the practice of so-called Shinrin-yoku, meaning immersing yourself in the forest or forest bathing. Now, 4 decades later, it is well established that nature connection supports calm, mental clarity, emotional self-regulation, and even social connections. And there are nature therapy programs being carried out all around the world for different purposes. Outdoor trips for US Army veterans with PTSD that help them deal with trauma. Gardening projects in UK prisons that contribute to rehabilitate inmates and reduce reoffending rates. Horticultural therapy projects in Sweden for people with severe job burnout, and many more. And increasingly, in many countries, in the UK, Spain, US, Canada, and others, doctors, social workers, and health professionals are issuing so-called green prescriptions, like the one I mentioned at the beginning, encouraging patients to spend time in nature as an alternative to conventional medication. The paradox is, there is this expression, this is a walk in the park, to mean that something is easy. But clearly, if we need doctors to remind us, it seems that for most of us, walking in the park is no longer a walk in the park. Ideally, nature therapy shouldn't have to be prescribed. we all know intuitively that you feel better when you spend time in nature. It makes sense when you think how we evolved. Our brains developed when we were surrounded by nature, when we were living in trees, while nowadays we spend most of our time indoors, in our homes, our schools, our cars, our workplaces, even when we exercise. Because let me ask you something. How many of you here manage to exercise outdoors for 1 hour a day on average? Raise your hands. Not even in nature, just outdoors. Raise your hands. I don't. Very few. Well, 1 hour of exercise in the open air is actually the minimum standard recommended by UN guidelines for prison inmates. So we are basically turning into prisoners of the indoors, of our own free will. And even when we are out in nature, we are often not there. Our mind is elsewhere. We go for a quick walk while we are checking our phones or listening to a podcast. And we will still benefit from being out there because of the cleaner air, because of certain compounds released by trees which enhance our immune system, contact with natural microorganisms that boost our microbiome. But the benefits of spending time in nature are much greater when we slow down and pay attention to our surroundings, to natural sounds such as birdsong, of the buzzing of insects, or natural shapes of flowers, leaves, plants, particularly certain shapes such as those with fractal patterns, as it has been found that they help soothe our brain and restore attention. There is a simple reason why natural sounds or shapes are beneficial for us. We are nature. We speak about nature as if we didn't belong to it, as if it was something different from us. But we are part of nature. When we stop to watch a beautiful landscape, such as stunning Dingle Peninsula here from Caherconry, or a sky full of stars, we often feel that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. Because we are. Everything is connected. We are part of a living system, and we can only thrive when everything is in balance. And when we become disconnected from nature, we lose connection not just from all other beings, but also from ourselves. For me, this realization has meant that I find peace and mindfulness in nature. It helps me to be more aware of my surroundings. It also gives me a deep sense of gratitude for what I have, and it helps me to deal better with what life throws at me. When I go to the forest with other people, I invite them to slow down and pay attention and be fully present. And something shifts in that interaction with the natural world. Suddenly we see things we hadn't noticed, that we had walked past hundreds of times. We see the beauty in the shape of a branch, in the sunlight through the trees. We enjoy the softness of moss when we touch it, and the earthy smell it leaves on our fingers. It is deeply grounding. For my kids, it means that they are connected to nature and they thrive with it. When my daughter wants to take a break, she goes for a walk around the fields in our home. I wish I had been able to do that as a teenager. My son tends to our vegetable garden at home. He loves the physical exercise outdoors. He gets at least as much of it as prison inmates. He knows when to plant which seeds, when to harvest, and is connected to the land and the seasons, like his great-grandparents. But I am one of the few privileged ones. Not everybody has a garden. As a society, we need to make it easier for everyone to access natural spaces. More local parks, walking trails, community gardens, and focus more on overall well-being rather than constant consumerism. After all, when you think about it, many of the things that do give us real joy in life are free. And some are just out there. So I'd like to invite you to try something simple. Next time you are out in nature, by the sea, in a forest, even a small park, a local park or a small garden, See what happens if you slow down and are fully present and pay attention to your surroundings. What can you see? What sounds can you hear? What catches your attention? The way children do. They explore and they marvel at everything. Perhaps you could try to do the same, with curiosity, without any hurry, without any purpose, without any phone, trying to see things through your own eyes, not through the lens of a photo that could be posted on social media. For me, that's where the real internal shift begins. Nature has a way of making us feel calm, grounded, connected. If you experience that too, remember, when you feel stressed or restless, there is nothing like a walk in the park. Don't wait for your doctor to prescribe it to you. Just go. Thank you.